Before we delve into the fairy tale turn head-scratching nightmare of a mystery that we would call Stop and Swap, first we need to set the scene. The zeitgeist of 1998. Children, let's face it, probably adults, sat down to play Banjo Kazooie. The internet was slow back then, so if you were to get stuck in a game, you'd likely be better off buying a Prima strategy guide and looking up the solution, rather than waiting for a 56k modem to load up a web page at a snail's pace. So, here I go, as a child, exploring the second stage of Banjo Kazooie. Heading to the southeast of the level, it's easy to see Shark Food Island, an isolated rock formation out at sea. Even as a child I sensed something eerie about its existence, almost a sense of that this would spur on school playground rumours, akin to the Mew under the truck rumours of Pokemon Generation 1. I think one reason I was so suspicious of Shark Food Island was the fact that it, in retrospect, subconsciously reminded me of Kramatoa in Donkey Kong Country 3, a secret submerged island with a cone-like shape, just like Shark Food Island, both games by Rare. Despite my suspicions, even as a kid, I was aware of the notion of game developers embellishing worlds as a way of adding a lived-in feeling to the environments. Not to mention, having seen plenty of wobbly textures on early PlayStation 1 games, and early PC games, you could never truly be sure if it was simply a wall that you were looking at, or the secret entrance to a long-lost level. More than often than not, it was just a wall. Any doubts I had as a kid would have been quashed had I realised this camera trick allows you to see the submerged island entrance, of course. Going back to 1998 and continuing with playing the game, explore Bubblegloop Swamp and Clanker's Cavern. Nothing there grabbed my attention in form of odd feelings, nothing mysterious. However, Freeze Easy Pete decided to slap me in the face with blatancy. Upon entering Wazza's cave and jumping on the ledge to save a Jinjo, I found myself face to face with a strangely haunting yet frustrating sight. Behind a clear slab of frozen ice, a gigantic, majestical ice key sat up on a podium in a silent, glistening cave. Nothing I did could seemingly break this ice wall that the keys sat behind. It was taunting me, and I suspect it taunted many other players too. It was unlike any other collectible that we'd currently seen in the game. Maybe it was part of some kind of quest that would lead to a Jiggy later on in the stage. But of course that never happened, did it? The ice key, the only secret item in the game visible by ordinary means. The game wants you to see it. It wants to, ironically, burn this frozen mysterious item into your mind. And it's hard to leave this item behind. Maybe there will be a use for it later though. Onto Gobi Desert, and this ancient door embedded into the mountainside. As a kid, I did feel a strange sense of this potentially being more than what appears to the eye. However, as with Shark Food Island, I had this hesitancy to jump to any silly ideas, and I felt complacent to the idea that it was simply just environment building. Nothing to see here, time to move on, right? Jumping ahead, Banjo and Kazooie is now 100% completed. All the Jiggies and all the music notes have been collected, and Grunty has been defeated. Now we can relax and enjoy this ending scene, a special bonus ending for achieving 100%. For our efforts, Mumbo Jumbo is going to show us some photos of secrets we missed, items used in the second game, Banjo Tooie. And imagine, to my surprise, the suspicious shark food island was now raised out of the ocean, revealing a door to the inside. I wonder what's inside there. Oh, and the ice key that we found in Waz's cave. Yeah, we've seen that before. Mumbo also shows us the desert door in Gobi's Valley, the door I had a vague suspicion about. My secret tingling sensors really must have been working correctly during my initial playthrough of the game. Now, these photographs that Mumbo had revealed had given us our first glimpse of what would be known as the mystery eggs. Wow! Inside the sarcophagus of Gobi's desert, there was a deep blue mystery egg. And inside Shark Food Island, at the top of the tower, there was a mysterious pink egg, rotating quietly on top of a platform. Now, having witnessed these secrets, I reset the game and I rushed back to Treasure Trove Cove, back to Shark Food Island, to discover it was still at the bottom of the ocean, in silent solitude, with its mystery pink egg locked away inside. And disappointingly, the ice key remained in solitude, in isolation, in its freezing chamber, probably reflecting the sharp, icy pain players felt still being denied access to the ice key. The blue mystery egg remained sealed in the sarcophagus beyond the ancient slab door of Gobi Valley. This is where this secret remained. All three secrets locked away for the foreseeable future. All three secret areas forbidden. However, some of the secrets and forbidden areas would remain untouched for longer than one secret in particular. We move on a couple of months or so. Banjo Kazooie is now being played and completed by many, and many have witnessed the bonus ending revealing the existence of the mystery eggs and the ice key. Again, it is 1998. The internet is still very much in its infancy. Banjo Kazooie has its own official website, and alongside that, Rare, the game developers, have their own independent website as well. Fans could send in questions. Usually, Rare would reply with sarcasm and jokes, never giving a straight answer. As exemplified by this image of the old Rareware Rumour Mill website, questions regarding the secret items, the ice key and the two mystery eggs, came flooding in to Rare's headquarters. But no matter how much fans questioned these items, we never really received a proper answer. As a bonus blast to the past, while researching, I stumbled across another huge mystery, a Banjo fan website almost 25 years old, hosted by Tripod. I have no idea how this website has lasted for so long, but fan sites like this used to be very common, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is something to be treasured. While people anxiously waited for Banjo Tooie in the deep dark corners of the internet, some naughty folk were hatching plans to enter the forbidden secret areas. Now, you need to remember, ROM hacking and ROM dumping and scouring a game's contents was no easy feat, especially in 1998. The most likely way to explore a game's secrets was with a GameShark cheat device, a cart which you would place the game cartridge on top of. This essentially allowed the user to poke and change data in the game's memory locations using hexadecimal codes. The user would still need to take precautions, as many people have reported, in some cases permanently messing up their game's memory. As further example of the time period, even seasoned game hackers would struggle to find some secrets in Banjo's game pack via the Game Shock for at least another 2 years. The mystery eggs posed a problem in particular. In order to collect the eggs, you'd need to load the area that they were in, and since both were located behind load screens in sealed off locations, this would make it extremely difficult. However, one secret item and its area were different: the ice key. In its quiet, mysterious ice chamber, the only thing keeping a gamer's hands off of the ice key was a thick sheet of impenetrable ice. In my naivety as a youngster, even I had attempted to steal the Turban Talon trot shoes from Bogey's slalom race and run into Waz's cave, hoping to smash through the ice wall with a lightning-fast speed. To no avail, of course. The ice key, however, was and is a loaded asset in the game world. If only we could burrow under the floor and pop up on the other side of the ice wall. Or what if we go over it? There is no way for Kazooie to fly in Waz's cave, but someone, somewhere, managed to figure out a code on a cheat device. Using what would be known as a moon jump code, Banjo could now float high above Waz's cave, and due to the cave having no roof, able to levitate and drop down into the ice key chamber. Collecting the ice key results in a thunderous regal fanfare. The satisfaction of grabbing the ice key is short-lived, however. The ice wall still blocks the entrance, and the illegitimate feeling of cheating to nab the ice key ultimately raises more questions. Still, how does one truly open the ice chamber? And this theme of satisfaction leading to more questions is something that would continue as we proceed forward. With the ice key collected, a new menu in the pause screen would be unlocked, entitled Stop and Swap. To quote RareGamer.co.uk's amazing article on this subject, picking up the ice key would essentially unlock Pandora's box. Bonus fun fact round. Which two stop and swap items would eventually, 15 years later on from 1998, technically be attainable without a cheat device by using in-game glitches? Answer: the ice key with the reverse B adventure glitch, and the blue mystery egg with an out of bounds glitch. Obviously these methods are still legitimate acquisitions of the stop and swap items, since the ice barrier and the ancient stone door remain sealed. However, I wanted to bring attention to Chroniky's amazing hard work and efforts, and this video chronicling stop and swap would feel incomplete without at least bringing attention to Chroniky's hard work. All credit goes to Chroniky's for the current 2 clips that you are seeing on the screen, and if you want to find out more about these, please head over to her channel, and there is a playlist full of Banjo Kazooie, Banjo Tooie and other game glitches as well. I'd also like to point out that it took Chroniky's 5 hours to record a video of her glitching through the Gobi Desert door. So the chances of this being performed by pure accident in 1998 would have been very, very unlikely. The story picks up midway through 1999 over at the RareWitchProject.com, a Rare website with a focus on Banjo Kazooie. Here, Two uber game hackers, Ice Mario and Subdrag, make an astonishing discovery with the Game Shark. They manage to find code deep in Banjo's game pack that triggers and activates the secret areas to open up. The ice wall is removed. The ancient stone door gone. Shark Food Island is now proudly standing high above the ocean with its entrance on full display and ready to be plundered. Basically, Ice Mario and Subdrag had tricked the game into thinking that it had received data from Banjo Tooie to open up the stop and swap areas. But the truly astonishing discovery was that there were, in fact, 6 mystery eggs and not just 2 as once believed. Another interesting discovery worth noting is that entering a secret area in which the game believes you entered in a legitimate fashion would in fact trigger an ostentatious fanfare and a musical cue that plays in the area which holds the secret item. I bring this up because previously moon jumping to the ice key negated the entrance fanfare and secret area music, and honestly this helps to explain and highlight why moon jumping to the ice key left us with such a cheap feeling and something felt quite unsatisfactory. Now onto the collection of the ice key. I want to spend a moment to appreciate Grant Kirkhope's work here musically. Each stop and swap secret item area has its own musical variation. As you may have heard a moment ago, the music inside Shark Food Island takes on a more beach shanty style, while the theme inside the icy chamber takes on a more glacial sound, comprised of a glockenspiel and pizzicato strings. Wow, that didn't roll off the tongue easily. Standing in this once illustrious chamber that once held the ice key, now it feels even chillier and mysterious.
Huh?
Yes, Kazooie. We'll talk about those 4 mystery eggs in a moment, but first of all, let's talk about Gobi's Valley. The ancient Stop and Swap tomb in Gobi's Valley possibly has my favourite of the Stop and Swap themes, including an Egyptian sounding flute and theremin. You truly felt like you were raiding in a long lost tomb, forbidden for anyone to enter. We should not be stealing the mystery eggs, at least not yet. With information that would come to light further down the line, it's quite possible that this tomb may not have been supposed to have been breached for anywhere up to 3 to 4 years later. As touched on briefly, Game Shark devices were not commonplace back in 1999. However, my friend had recently purchased a Game Shark, and with the codes released by Ice Mario and Subdrag to open up the secret stop and swap areas readily available, it was time to do the forbidden. With the Game Shark hack codes entered, I took control of Banjo and headed straight to Shark Food Island in Treasure Trove Cove. It was an intimidating and haunting sight, to be swimming towards an area that was still supposed to be submerged under the ocean. You know, as opposed to towering high in the air, explicitly exposing my misbehaviour of tricking the game into unlocking a secret area just so that I could plunder it. Now, with the pink egg in hand, I headed over to Waz's cave in Freeze Easy Peak and grabbed the ice key. I felt like I'd done something illegal, the sentiment echoed by the mischievous sounding ice key chamber secret music tinkering in the background. Of course, I grabbed the blue egg in the valley along the way. Again, the feeling of having done something sinful washed over me. On June the 9th, 1999, Rare released their Tepid Seat segment on their website. Fans had emailed, in a multitude of questions. Most questions pertained to the development of Banjo Kazooie. Of course, questions regarding the secrets creeped up too. Now remember, it is 1999. Game Sharks were a secondary peripheral that not a lot of N64 owners had access to. So even if you heard that hackers had gained access to the secret areas, only a select few owners with Game Sharks could actually access them. As you can see on screen, question 31 on the Tepid Seat quizzes: are there any other rooms in Banjo Kazooie that are locked off until Banjo Tooie is released? Perhaps the closed barrel in Mad Monster Mansion, or the two doors in Grunty's transformation room. So imagine, to my surprise, to discover that GameShark codes had opened the metal X-sealed wine barrel, and it was revealed that there was a small chamber behind it with a cyan egg on a small raised podium. It was amazing to finally see a new hidden location. Loitering around in the caveat behind the now open wine barrel, you soon realise the music is similar to the music in the ancient tomb, with the addition of ghoulish laughter and Gruntilda's evil cackling. For those curious, using a clip-through wall cheat reveals nothing but a black void. The secret chamber and egg are not loaded assets in the game until data from Banjo Tooie is detected by Banjo Kazooie's game pack. Anyway, while it is great to see a new secret area, a secret item being bundled into the back of a wine barrel hardly has the same prestige as the ice key or the... Before I was interrupted by Kazooie, I was going to say, though the cyan egg's location may lack prestige, it is indeed the final secret area in Banjo Kazooie. Yes, the last secret area. Despite the fact 3 more secret eggs exist. Strangely, the secret is also located in the same level as the cyan egg, Mad Monster Mansion. So, whereabouts in Mad Monster Mansion is the next mystery egg? Well, the green mystery egg is unceremoniously plonked on top of Logo the toilet's toiletry system. Sure, the epic fanfare music plays upon entering the room with the green mystery egg inside, but this is a room that is entered on regular gameplay. It is no secret room. Weird. We are actually posed with 2 questions here. 1. Why are there 2 top secret items in Mad Monster Mansion, while some stages have no secrets at all? Question 2. Why is the green egg simply dumped on top of Logo in a non-secret room? Newsflash, I actually asked the creator of Stop and Swop himself these questions, and I got a solid answer. Keep watching to find out later.
Huh? Next, we will briefly discuss the yellow mystery egg. I say brief because this is one of the least interesting of them all. In the final stage, Clip Clop Woods, during the winter, breaking into Nabnut the Squirrel's house will reveal the yellow mystery egg. This one simply on a table while Nabnut sleeps in bed. Again, the fanfare plays on tapers into the Stop and Swap secret area theme, but this one lacks any gravitas. The music sounds playful, and again, the secret resides in a common place the player accesses regularly. It feels lackluster. Finally, the red mystery egg in Rusty Bucket Bay. This one placed on a bed itself, inside a common room again. 3 mystery eggs placed on some form of house furniture. Very unsophisticated. Well, at least Rusty Bucket Bay holds something else that is interesting, but we will explore that later. By the way, Stop and Swap items are permanently unlocked across all 3 save files on the Banjo Kazooie game pack. Even if the save files are erased, the Stop and Swap items remain collected, and the forbidden secret areas that once housed them remain open and plundered. Your naughty raiding antics by GameShark cannot be re-hidden. This fact highlighted that the situation in regards to the Stop and Swap items was highly unusual. Jumping back to the tepid seat, one Banjo fan asks if glitching and collecting the ice key before Tooie's release could cause any glitches. Ray responds that if they can come up with a spoil spalty type plan to make the GameShark ice key grabbers regret it, they might just do it. This, of course, caused some panic to players that had grabbed the secrets with the GameShark, including myself. So much that I signed up to a video and game rental store, booked out their copy of Banjo Kazooie and swapped it with my GameShark copy, just so I didn't have those secrets anymore. Skipping ahead to the 12th of April 2001, Banjo Tooie is finally released in Europe. Meanwhile, Tooie had been released in North America and Japan in November 2000. With America having a 6 months head start on playing and exploring Banjo Tooie, I avoided the internet in case of spoilers. Not that I was a frequent internet user in 2001. In fact, this is back when revealing that you used the World Wide Web would get you labelled as a gigantic geek. Regardless, Banjo Tooie was a great success and it was a lot of fun too. The question was, well, what about Stop and Swap? How do we return to Banjo Kazooie and access those secret areas and then transfer the secret items to Banjo Tooie? It would not take long for players and avid followers of the Stop and Swap mystery to find something majorly concerning. In relatively easy to find secret caves at the start of the game in Spiral Mountain, players would discover imprisoned cute googly-eyed personifications of Banjo Kazooie game packs. How could something so cute harbour something so potentially horrifying? Attacking one would cause it to break open, revealing a pink mystery egg, much like the one in Shark Food Island, except much, much smaller. Collecting the egg would result in a lightweight sound, as opposed to the loud, thunderous fanfare in Banjo Kazooie. The second Banjo Kazooie game pack, once busted open, dropped the blue mystery egg. Again, a fraction of the size of the one in Banjo Kazooie, and of course, no sign of that ancient secret tomb that was in Banjo Kazooie. The eggs felt like quick compensatory afterthoughts, quickly brushed under the rug. In Jinjo Village, a hardly secret small ice cave also contains one of these cute personified game packs. What do you think was in this one? Yep, the ice key. The ice key unceremoniously flops out and slaps to the floor like a wet fish. In addition, the key, once full of majesty, is now the size of a toothpick. Gone are the days of triumph and exuberance that the key once held as it rotated out of reach in the ice chamber of Waz's cave. The ice key now has the dignity of a queen falling from her horse and getting her dress caught in the stirrups, leaving her hanging there in disgrace.
Once the secrets in Banjo Tooie were collected, players could take the eggs to Heggy's egg shed. Here, Heggy would hatch the 2 secret eggs, unlocking 2 bonuses in the game. One being the homing eggs, which allowed Kazooie's eggs to lock onto the enemies when attacking them. The second unlocked the Breagle Bash, a melee attack where Banjo comically slams Kazooie into the ground. Curiously, there is already a yellow mystery egg in Heggy's egg shed. However, Kazooie has to hatch this with her egg hatching ability, and this will unlock a Jinjo in multiplayer. Of the so-called secret items in Banjo Tooie, the ice key was the most interesting. In a secluded, wide corner in the icy side of the stage Hailfire Peaks, a huge sheet of thick, transparent ice shields an ice chamber, housing an ominous, huge ice safe. The safe has a carved-out portion shaped much like the giant ice key from Banjo Kazooie's first game, the implication being that this is where the ice key was born and where it belongs. To reach the safe, players would actually need to find a secret entrance via Glitter Gulch Mine. I will admit, entering the ice chamber with the ice safe did evoke some of the sensations and mystique of the original Stop and Swap mystery of Banjo Kazooie. To think that the ice key from Waz's cave was destined to open this ice safe, we finally knew the ice key's use. Well, so we thought, but we will go into that later. But for now, the ice key found in Banjo Tooie had found its use. Inside, a Mega Glowbo can be released. This is basically a collectible that can be taken to Humba Wumba, who will use it to transform Kazooie into Dragon Kazooie. Did the existence of the small mystery eggs and the small ice key in Banjo Tooie signal and symbolise the death of Stop and Swap? Indeed, to many, Stop and Swap, the aforementioned method of exchanging secret items to Banjo Tooie from the first game, seemed to have been dropped and replaced with this scenario. While I myself was concerned and dubious we could ever go back to retrieve the items from Banjo Kazooie and spirit them away to the second game, there was one big mystery that still provided some hope. To move forward with the story, we need to take a step back to the first game, Banjo Kazooie. Back during the 1999 Tepid Seat session, question 14 asks, in Mad Monster Mansion, there is a room with 2 pictures, one with Gruntilda and one with an evil pirate bloke. Will the pirate be a villain for Banjo Kazooie to face? Rare answered that the pirate has a mission and a purpose all of his own, but this is not the time nor place to reveal the merest hint, and that we might learn more from a certain tavern in the future. In Banjo Tooie, we now cut back to Jolly Roger's Lagoon, a peaceful seaside town, where a tavern can be found. Entering one of the side rooms reveals something quite shocking. A giant Captain Blackeye sat in the tavern. But the shocking thing about this
is that there are 3 pictures adorning the wall. One of Treasure Trove Cove, one of a raised shark food island, and one of the pink egg inside of Shark Food Island. Interacting with Captain Blackeye himself was practically pointless. He asks you to get him a drink of water and collapses in a drunken stupor and continuously repeats the dialogue. "Ah, I had a dream once. I were in this fine game. A bear stole me glory. Looked a bit like you, he did." The ramblings of being in a previous game and his glory being stolen by a bear in correlation to the pictures of the enigmatic pink egg obviously had the fandom putting their detective hats on. I will cut to the chase. It turned out that these lines of dialogue actually were a reference to the game Dream, Land of Giants. Dream was essentially the original concept for the game that would radically become Banjo Kazooie. Blackeye was to feature in the game, but when Dream eventually became Banjo Kazooie, Banjo effectively stole Blackeye's glory. However, it is very likely that Blackeye's involvement in Tooie was originally to be larger. Rare had stated Blackeye had a mission and purpose all of his own during 1999's Tepid Sea. However, in Banjo Tooie, he basically did nothing but sit amongst pictures referencing the secrets in Banjo Kazooie. With Captain Blackeye in mind, we return to investigate the original Banjo Kazooie game. There are 2 interesting pieces of potential evidence that Blackeye was once supposed to be involved with the stop and swap connection in Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie. The first was the fact that in Mad Monster Mansion there is a room with a huge 4-poster bed with his portrait hanging on the walls. Along with that, a treasure chest, much like the chests beside him in the tavern of Jolly Roger's Lagoon. Some fans speculated that maybe stop and swap eggs would be deposited into the chest in Mad Monster Mansion, and then by whatever data transfer method was used, the eggs would emerge in the chest in the tavern of Banjo Tooie. However, I will nip that in the bud right away. I never believed that the chest in Mad Monster Mansion was designed to open, and further exploration years later reveals that the chest indeed is a prop with no separating lid. With the chest easily debunked at this point, one very compelling clue resides in Rusty Bucket Bay, where we find the red mystery egg in the captain's cabin. In Rusty Bucket's navigation room, a large map hangs on the wall. Investigating this closely reveals that the location on the map is Treasure Trove Cove. And to make things more curious, to the southeast of the map, an X marks the spot. An X right on top of Shark Food Island. Now, at this point in time, it was roughly around the time that I signed up to the Game FAQs forums in 2001. Mostly frequenting the Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie forums. Both Banjo forums began to fill up with posts concerning stop and swap. Many Banjo fans chiming in with their theories and crazy ideas concerning the mystery eggs and the ice keys. I remember groups of us assigning ourselves to various levels across both Banjo games, all of us vowing to investigate and scan certain stages as much as possible for any sign or clue that could lead us to discovering what would trigger the stop and swap event and allow us to exchange the items from Banjo Kazooie over to Banjo Tooie. I remember being tasked to beak bust every palm tree in Treasure Trove Cove, hoping it would trigger some event to raise Shark Food Island. Yes, it really got that crazy.
Whoa!
Of course, nobody found anything until somebody did. Game hackers Subdrag and Ice Mario both returned in 2001 with a bounty of information. Most important was the discovery of some Sandcastle cheat codes in the original Banjo Kazooie game. In the second stage of Banjo Kazooie, Treasure Trove Cove, a Sandcastle exists, which is used as part of a puzzle in the main adventure of the game. By beat busting all of the tiles on the floor to spell out Banjo Kazooie, a golden jiggy is rewarded to the player. However, this lettered Sandcastle floor also doubled up as a cheat code activation screen. By spelling out cheat followed by some phrase, the player could unlock things such as infinite eggs or golden feathers. Subdrag and Ice Mario, after hard work ploughing the game's memory with cheat devices, finally discovered 7 exciting codes which would unlock the stop and swap items in Banjo Kazooie. Spelling out cheat, now you can see a nice ice key which you can have for free, would result in a static cutscene of the ice key chamber now open. Likewise, inputting cheat out of the sea rises to reveal more secret prizes will show a cutscene of Shop Food Island standing proud above the water level. Cheat, a desert door opens wide, ancient secrets wait inside. Don't you go and tell her about the secret in her cellar. The X barrel of Mad Monster Mansion is now open. Amidst the haunted gloom, a secret in the bathroom. The green egg appears on top of Logo the toilet. Cheat, now you will be able to see it on Nabnut's table. The yellow mystery egg will appear on Nabnut's table in Click Clock Woods. And finally, cheat, this secret you'll be grabbing in the captain's cabin will make the red egg appear in Rusty Bucket Bay. Now, even Banjo fans without access to a game shop could access the secret areas in Banjo Kazooie with the Sandcastle codes. The codes made their way into Nintendo gaming magazines, and Rare kept tight-lipped about them. These codes had taken approximately 2.5 years for Subdrag and Ice Mario to discover, and they were very clearly not intended for public use at this time, and still appear to not be the legitimate way to access the items, since the codes began with cheat. In fact, many believe that these codes were simply debug codes. Regardless, the stop and swap items were there for the taking, but still, we had no use for them. Now that everyone had access to the Banjo Kazooie secret areas via the newly discovered Sandcastle codes, everyone turned to Banjo Tooie to find this possible connection between both games. However, Ice Mario and Subdrag came in clutch with new discoveries in Banjo Tooie. Banjo Tooie is such a huge game that combing the game's code was a large undertaking and started off quite slow. Eventually, some interesting information would be discovered in Banjo Tooie's memory. One of these findings was a base egg, an unused model of the full-size stop and swap egg taken straight from Banjo Kazooie. Here I have included a post from Subdrag himself talking about the base egg discovery. As you will see, bad news was that the big yellow base egg that was present in the American version of Banjo Tooie was absent from the PAL version of Banjo Tooie, which was released around 6 months later. Rare had clearly tidied up unrequired game code from the PAL release. If at any point in development Banjo Tooie was intended to connect to Banjo Kazooie, and use the same eggs from the first game, then these large eggs would have been found in place of the game pack versions found in the final game. I remember reading this exact blog post in 2001 and being very disheartened. Had the stop and swap feature really been dropped? What about Captain Blackeye with the picture of a pink egg beside him? What is going off? I would like to take the opportunity during this segment to talk about some of Banjo Tooie's mysteries, which may or may not ever have pertained to the stop and swap mystery. I wish to bring these to your attention for completionist's sake, and because I still see misinformation and confusion regarding these topics. It was also around this time where some fans speculated that the old stop and swap feature had been completely dropped as a form of punishment by Rare due to the fact that game hackers had been hacking into the secret areas in Banjo Kazooie. It was simply a conspiracy theory that didn't turn out to be true. However, if the stop and swap feature had indeed been removed, it would also possibly mean that any environments or locations that may have involved stop and swap may also have been removed from the game. What if there had been an area in Banjo Tooie where the player would need to go and stand in order to retrieve the secrets once they'd been sent over from Banjo Kazooie? Well, one breakthrough was found involving Banjo Tooie's fast travel method. Silos existed in the game that would quickly walk the player from one area to another had they previously visited it. What was discovered was that 3 unused silo location names existed in the game's memory. Through a hacking device, the text for the silos could be assigned to show up in the game's silos. No corresponding location was found along with them, however, meaning that they could not transport the player to the original intended area. There were 7 usable silos in the finished game, with one unused silo being called Silo 8 and another being called Silo 9. These are without a doubt simply leftovers. There is also unused text for a silo entitled Ridiculously Secret Area present in the game code. From examining the game code for Banjo Tooie, Banjo PL from the Rare Witch Project forums concludes that the Ridiculously Secret Area text was added very late in development because it is set in the memory after Silo 8 and Silo 9. Of course, speculation was rife with the Ridiculously Secret Area. A special location perhaps where the stop and swap items would have been retrieved from Banjo Kazooie? Or maybe it was simply a joke left in the code of the game, as the developers of Rare knew hackers would go hunting through Banjo Tooie's game data as they had done with Banjo Kazooie's previously. Ultimately, we'll never know if the Ridiculously Secret Area ever had anything to do with stop and swap. Although honestly, I didn't truly believe that it ever did. There was lots of speculation back in the day, and that's why I wanted to bring this situation to your attention. Unrelated to the silos, but curiously, unused text mimicking the text used in Banjo Kazooie when collecting the pink egg, blue egg and ice key is also present in Banjo Tooie's memory. Perhaps it was intended originally that this text from Banjo Kazooie would have been reused in Banjo Tooie once the player had collected the pink egg, the blue egg and the ice key from the miniature Banjo Kazooie game packs in Banjo Tooie. Another major point of mystery in Banjo Tooie was Grunty's lair. Grunty's lair served as the main overworld in the original game. In the sequel, Banjo Tooie, the entrance can be accessed. However, it is soon apparent that the further regions of the lair are off record, due to boulders sealing off the further entrances. Apart from a character called Cheeto and a torn portrait of Grunty with feathers in a nest to replenish the player's feather supply, there was nothing really of use in the lair. The ripped portraits of Grunty and Banjo Tooie made people question if there was anything behind it in the first game also. However, investigating it has proven nothing to be behind portrait in Banjo Kazooie. While on the subject of Grunty's lair in the original game, many people suspected secrets hid behind the large doors of the transformation room on the top floor of the tower. Again, extensive research into the first game's code has revealed nothing appears to exist behind them. Jumping back to the sequel, Banjo Tooie, the mystery holds a bit more weight. Upon entering the lair, text at the bottom of the screen states that this is the entrance to Gruntilda's lair. The implication being, with this distinction, that there are different parts to the lair. Banjo Tooie's game code was analysed by a RareWitch project member, Cool Boyman, and he discovered unused text for an area called Tower Room. The area which Banjo Kazooie contained the transformation room and the cauldron for the final boss fight. Obviously, there is no way to break the boulders in the lair, and clipping through them with a cheat device reveals nothing but a void. Interestingly, it appears the way to reach the tower room may actually have been from the outside. Outside the lair in Spiral Mountain, the tower can obviously be seen. By examining the tower in Banjo Tooie, it is clear that one of the tower windows has an opening moulded out, which is not present in the first game's model of the tower. It is a detail that is also detectable by viewing the tower via the wireframe. Additionally, an unfinished entity in the game's code called CH Grunty Lair Exit Tower Window exists, but it is never used. It is likely that this was intended to be a breakable window. Rare employees Steve Males and Greg Males were both questioned in regards to this on Twitter, but neither had a solid answer. Some fans were obviously curious if the tower room in Tooie may have been an area where stop and swap items may have potentially arrived over once sent from Kazooie. But who knows, even the developers themselves don't remember the use of the tower in Tooie. I would like to speak briefly about a mode called Bottle's Revenge. I won't dwell on this too much, as I don't believe this is linked to the stop and swap narrative. Anyway, it was discovered by Ice Mario around 2004 that an additional multiplayer mode existed in Banjo Tooie's memory. The first player would resume the role of Banjo in the adventure mode, and a second player would resume the role of a deceased Devil Bottles and take control of nearby enemies to impede the person playing as Banjo. A lot of speculation regarding the existence of Bottle's Revenge had floated around internet forums for quite a while, and additionally, people wondered if this could have been a feature unlocked should the stop and swap eggs have been swapped over to Banjo Tooie. Greg Males went on to say years later he wishes this feature made it to Banjo Tooie, but they couldn't get it to work correctly, so it was scrapped. It essentially manifested as counter-cooperative mode in Perfect Dark 64, where the second player resumes the role of the opponents to stop player 1 completing their mission. Greg went on to say that the main reason that Bottle's Revenge was dropped was because they couldn't get the boss battles to work quite right, and it would be quite easy for the second player to exploit boss animations
and thus making it impossible for the first player playing as Banjo to defeat the bosses. Interestingly enough, the version of Bottler's Revenge that can be recovered from Banjo Tooie's game data runs pretty smoothly, and when entering a boss room, Devil Bottles merely disappears for the duration of the boss fight. So it is still unclear why exactly this feature was left out in the end. Regardless, I don't believe this was ever really connected to Stop and Swap. The final Banjo Tooie mystery of substance is that of the discovery of the text Glowbo cave in the game's memory, situated between the rest of the coding for Cloud Cuckoo Land. The cave is named after the creature that the small ice key collected in Banjo Tooie unlocks, which is then used to transform Kazooie into Dragon Kazooie. A very likely area of a potential unused cave exists on top of a purple cliff ledge, which leads to a strange purple wall with a fissure going down it. However, nothing, including firing grenade eggs at it, can open it. Was this ever tied to the original idea of Stop and Swap? Again, who knows? But this location does hold an aura of mystery, as if something here is incomplete. A feeling Banjo fans will feel in another location in another Rare game entirely. So, with all major Banjo Tooie mysteries covered, and an understanding that the stop and swap process between Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie was likely removed, though not confirmed, where do we go now? The story is far from over, and before we get to the really juicy bits, let's look at some stop and swap references in other Rare games circa the early 2000s. Though not vital to the story, I think it is still worth mentioning at least two of these references due to the fact it highlights the crazy twists and turns stop and swap truth seekers faced. In 2005, Rare released Banjo Pilot on the Game Boy Advance. The player would receive Cheeto pages throughout their time playing, and they could be exchanged for bonus rewards from Cheeto himself. If 999 pages were amassed and the Rare time trials were beaten, Cheeto would offer to sell the player an option called Stop and Swap. Fulfilling the requirements was no easy task, and those that managed to do so were then told, "So, you want to learn about Stop and Swap? I hope you're ready, here goes. Why don't you stop annoying me and swap this game for a nice book or something?" A huge anticlimax. The most interesting stop and swap reference that would whip the Banjo Kazooie community into a frenzy was in Rare's 2003 release of Grabbed by the Ghoulies on the Xbox. The game had multiple references to Banjo Kazooie, but the most shocking was found in Chapter 3. While exploring in a classroom, players could come across a whiteboard with a homework assignment written on it. 1. Collect the ice key. 2. Collect eggs. 3. Activate secret level. Along with those key tasks were scrawled images of 4 mystery eggs and the ice key. Additionally, 3 overhead maps with X's on them. Since Stop and Swap had not been confirmed or denied at this stage, fans got to work to try and make sense of the situation. One major point was the fact that only 4 mystery eggs were drawn on the whiteboard, not 6. Did this mean 2 eggs were fake? Could having all 6 eggs, with 2 being fakes, be a failsafe by Rare to void the rewards of Stop and Swap for players that had cheated to get the items in Banjo Kazooie prematurely? After all, the Tepid Seat did allude to this back in 1999. Different theories were thrown around, Only the blue, pink and the cyan egg were real, because they were all in hidden areas. Others speculated the cyan egg was a fake, and the X barrel indicated it was a sign not to be collected. Realistically, it was a joke by Rare. We know in retrospect that there was absolutely no way Banjo Kazooie or Banjo Tooie could have space in the data to contain a secret level.
Yahoo!
So far, I've tried to tell the story in chronological order. However, with it spanning 25 years and multiple games, along with different years of various discoveries, it can result in jumping ahead in the timeline. So now, in order to get to the good stuff, we jump back to 1999, the release of Donkey Kong 64. What are we doing back in 1999, and what are we doing hanging out with the Kongs? Well, while it was originally believed that the Stop and Swap secrets were intended to exclusively be used between Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie upon its eventual release in 2000, it is now apparent that that is not the case. Leading up to Donkey Kong 64's release, Rare posted promotional images on their website to whet the appetite of gamers. One of the images showed Donkey Kong in his treehouse with a fridge freezer in the corner with an image depicting Banjo and Kazooie's faces on it. Upon the release of the game, the freezer was nowhere to be seen, not even after completing the game to 101%. Well, after the release of Banjo Tooie, the hacker guys over at the Rare Witch Project once again got us covered. In 2003, it was discovered that the text Ice Key was hiding snugly in Donkey Kong's game memory. Additionally, they found that by examining the sound modifier, the Stop and Swap fanfare music from Banjo Kazooie was in Donkey Kong 64. I would like to point out that the fanfare music from Banjo Kazooie does feature in Donkey Kong 64 when the characters Troff and Scoff are fed enough bananas and they open the boss door for Donkey Kong. However, that is the Donkey Kong 64 version of the fanfare. However, this version of the fanfare from Banjo Kazooie also exists in Donkey Kong's memory. Note the different tempo compared to the Donkey Kong version. It is possible that bringing the Ice Key over from Banjo Kazooie and then going to a certain chamber or location in Donkey Kong may have triggered this specific ostentatious fanfare from Banjo Kazooie. As Subdrag points out, unfortunately, Rare seemed to cut corners and reuse the fanfare from Banjo Kazooie, albeit to a different tempo for Troff and Scoff. But the original Stop and Swap fanfare from Banjo Kazooie in Donkey Kong had to be there for the intention of the Stop and Swap process. But was there really any merit to this? The answer is absolutely yes, but it would take until 2008 until anything could be done with the Ice Key text in Donkey Kong 64. Rune Hero 123 of the Rare Witch Project forums revealed his Ice Key discovery on the 23rd of July 2008. I will keep things simple for the sake of the flow of this video, but essentially Rune Hero 123 had discovered through hacking how to activate the collection of the Ice Key in Donkey Kong 64. However, an Ice Key would merely appear in the player's inventory as a 1 out of 1 collectible. No accompanying image of the ice key was present, likely removed from the game's data before release. So basically you could, through hacking, have the ice key collected in Donkey Kong 64. However, there was no image to represent that you had it in your possession. For those interested in the in-depth details of how Rune Hero 123 found and activated the ice key, you can check out the Rare Witch Project thread where he goes into detail. So, could there be more remnants of Stop and Swop in Donkey Kong 64? Well, nothing points to the eggs ever being planned to be transferred over to Donkey Kong 64. There is, however, more to the story involving the ice key. A glitch in Donkey Kong 64 that would trigger a strange cutscene in Donkey Kong's treehouse was discovered. In the cutscene, the camera would pan across to the empty area where the Banjo Kazooie freezer once stood in the promotional material, and then warp the player over to a seemingly uninteresting wall in an ice chamber located in Crystal Caves. This ice chamber is a part of natural gameplay and it is relatively unremarkable. In fact, there is not much to do there at all, apart from Chunky's Gorilla Gone pack, which spawns a golden banana. In addition, upon entering the area normally, the camera would awkwardly swing and position the players to view pretty much what is a barren wall. Remember that purple ledge in Cloud Cuckoo Land in Banjo Tooie that I said felt unfinished or unused? That is exactly the same feeling that this area has. I'm not suggesting the two locations are linked in any way, simply that they stand out for their remarkable oddity.
Whoa!
But what if I told you that we knew for a fact there used to be a lot more here? Okay guys, I'm gonna say it out loud. Stop and Swop was a dropped and removed feature as early as 1999, while Banjo fans were still going on SNS hunts in 2000 and 2001. However, the story is far from over. Due to the removal of the Stop and Swop feature so late into Donkey Kong's production, some European Nintendo guides for Donkey Kong existed depicting the original map layout for Crystal Caves. In the North Room, which we looked at a moment ago, an extra small chamber can be seen attached behind a large door. With this, we can assume that originally players would smash the ice to enter the chamber as usual, and then enter the North Room, which had a large ice door incorporated into it, in place of that empty wall. Note the camera dragged into a pan back to focus on something of importance, which is no longer there. Along with the ice key text, it makes logical sense that the ice key would be sent from Banjo Kazooie to Donkey Kong 64 to open this chamber in Crystal Caves. We have a giant icy locked door in Donkey Kong 64 and a giant ice key in Banjo Kazooie, so this is essentially what would happen. Approaching the ice door, the player may have potentially pulled or pushed a nearby lever, which would result in a cutscene, possibly in the corner, showing the ice wall in Wazza's cave back in Banjo Kazooie shattering open. Behind the scenes, Donkey Kong 64 would begin writing payload data to the N64's memory with the value 0x10E. The player, having seen something occur in Banjo Kazooie, would turn Donkey Kong 64 off and swap to the Banjo Kazooie cartridge and turn on the N64. On starting up, Banjo Kazooie would scan the N64's memory for the value 0x10E. Once this value is discovered, the game is basically told by the Nintendo 64 to open the ice key chamber in Wozz's cave. You go to Freeze Easy Peak and get the ice key. Upon collecting the ice key, another payload of data would be written to the Nintendo 64's memory. And now we switch back to Donkey Kong 64. Upon starting up, Donkey Kong 64 would scan the N64's memory to find the recently deposited payload from Banjo Kazooie, and so the N64 will load the ice key into Donkey Kong 64's game. How exactly things played out from here exactly is speculation. One of my theories is that upon returning to Donkey Kong 64 with the ice key in the game memory, you would either begin in Donkey Kong's treehouse or be instructed to go there, in which the unused cutscene we discussed earlier will reveal the freezer open up with the ice key arriving to Donkey Kong from Banjo Kazooie's world. Once the freezer opened up, the ice key would automatically add to the player's inventory. It is possible that the player would instantly be warped to the ice store so they could use the key without needing to trek all the way back to Crystal Caverns. Or possibly, once something near the ice store was set in motion, the cutscene in Donkey Kong's treehouse would show Banjo Kazooie freezer open up as a hint of where to go next. The cutscene would then revert back to Donkey Kong near the ice key door, effectively not really warping the player but cutting back to where the player currently is. The player then goes to the treehouse, enters the freezer and is told to stop and swap. Heck, maybe the Banjo Kazooie freezer itself had a lever or TNT device inside of it to be triggered, which symbolically breaks the ice in Banjo Kazooie's realm, opening the ice barrier in Wozz's cave. I do wish to reiterate that all of the images of the ice key door and the open freezer are artists' renditions, and that the theories are just that, theories. However, we do know for a fact that the ice key was intended to go to Donkey Kong from Banjo Kazooie and open the ice door, and more solid evidence of that will be discussed very shortly. As for the ice key door in Donkey Kong 64, who knows what the reward behind it was. I'm sure the Banjo Kazooie stop and swap fanfare would have played upon opening and entering, but the knowledge of the reward is lost to time. I am certain it would have been a bonus to enjoy immediately after the anticipation of transferring the key over to Donkey Kong and then opening the door, rather than it being another goose chase and having to wait to find out what is next. Here is a representation of how Stop and Swap would have gone most likely in regards to Banjo Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo Tooie had the process gone as planned. Rare alluded to Blackeye having his own mission in Banjo Tooie, so most likely talking to him would have resulted in a cut camera showing Shock Food Island rising out of Treasure Trove Cove Ocean. Like explained with the ice key in Donkey Kong 64 previously, data would be stored temporarily in the N64's memory. Player swaps to Banjo Kazooie, goes to grab the egg, then turns off the N64 and replaces Banjo Tooie. the pink egg would be transferred to Banjo Tooie. As for the Ice Key and Donkey Kong 64, we obviously just discussed that. For reference sake going forward, we are going to call this the OG Stop and Swap. Remember that this is the dropped Stop and Swap feature that included at the very least these 3 games. So we're over an hour into this deep dive and have only just touched upon the technical aspects of Stop and Swap, and I still have not gone into immense technical detail. Well, 2 reasons. I do not want to disrupt the narrative flow of the video, and second, I don't wish to overburden less tech savvy people with too much tech speak. We will, however, look a bit more in depth to the process a bit later in the next chapter, and I will provide links to Rare employees discussing Stop and Swap's full technicalities, so you can fully flesh out your knowledge on the topic if you so wish. Before we do move to the next chapter, I want to raise some more information about the Ice Door Chamber in Donkey Kong 64. It is a known fact that the room also has a bunch of deactivated enemy spawns in it. Some have speculated that these enemies were intended to guard the Ice Door, but I disagree. I believe that in an earlier build, and as exemplified by the kiosk build of Donkey Kong 64, that originally Chunky Kong would enter the room, be locked in, and have to defeat a bunch of gremlins for a golden banana. At some point it was decided the Ice Key Door would be added into this room. Having a bunch of enemies spawning in front of the door would detract from the marvel and experience of finding the Ice Key Door. So to be less intrusive, the enemy challenge was scrapped and the Gorilla Gom pad was added. Now the golden banana could be collected in a much less distracting way, while giving the Ice Key Door the attention it deserved. However, since Stop and Swap was removed from the game so late into development, Rare simply removed the door and left the Gorilla Gom pad there as the activity to acquire the golden banana, and never reinstated the enemy Ord challenge for Chunky. Just something I wanted to put out there concerning the unactivated enemy spawners in this area. Also, that the kiosk version has showed no signs of Stop and Swap related remnants in general. The clip that you are watching is a ROM hack of the Donkey Kong 64 kiosk version, which has the final version of Donkey Kong 64's geometry transplanted into it so that it's kind of playable. This is courtesy of Look at the Window on YouTube. In 1999, Rare founder Tim Stamper and Banjo Kazooie's programmer Paul Makachet filed a patent, US Patent 6820265B1, also known as System Method and Data Storage Medium for sharing data between video games. I promise I memorised all of that and I didn't just read that from a notebook. Anyway, the patent would be published online on November the 16th, 2004. Banjo Kazooie and Stop and Swap fanatics could now easily read the proposed idea behind the feature and what it would entail. As you would imagine, it is a lengthy and technical read, but here I will go over the particularly interesting parts in a simplified fashion. If you wish to read the document in detail, I have provided the link here. The reason behind the feature being called Stop and Swap is apparent from the get-go, as the patent would detail the intention of transferring the mystery eggs and the ice key by way of cold swapping and hot swapping. Cold swapping meaning that the console is turned off when swapping the games, and hot swapping being if the console is turned on during the switching. Though I do want to stress that ultimately cold swapping was the intended method, as confirmed by Paul Makachek later on. Oh, and to those who it may concern, a quick side note, can we stop saying that they spelled swap wrong? Swap is a valid variation of the spelling. Anyway, if code swapping was done correctly, then memory from the first game cartridge would temporarily remain inside the N64's memory for a short period of time, roughly 23 seconds, Paul will later confirm. Data basically being transferred without a direct source of power. In fact, I wonder if the ice key was conceptually conceived as a bit of a joke, in the sense that it is being transported across games via code swapping. The patent also brings up the hypothetical scenario of a huge blocked icy cave with a keyhole in one game and a giant ice key existing in another. Obviously alluding to Donkey Kong 64's long-lost ice key door and Banjo Kazooie 64's mesmerising ice key rotating in its chamber. The patent goes on to mention pulling a lever in the blocked icy chamber, which would send information or a flag to signal what had happened to the N64's memory. Then, turning off the N64, we swap to Banjo Kazooie and grab the now accessible ice key. I don't need to explain what we do with the ice key once we've collected it. The patent was drafted during development window for Banjo Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, so ultimately it adds up that this hypothetical ice key and door scenario had made its way into Donkey Kong 64. I will be touching on some of the other points that Paul mentions during this interview at raregamer.co.uk. However, if you want to delve deeper into the computer science and the beginnings of Stop and Swap, please check out this great interview on the website, but please make sure you come back, because we've got a lot more to discuss, and also we're about to see now what Nintendo's response was to the old Stop and Swap affair. Lead engineer Paul Makachek provided us with a fax he received from Nintendo's tech support that documents the cancelling of the Stop and Swap feature. While Stop and Swap is fully functional and intact in Banjo Kazooie, Nintendo's Director of Technical Support raised issues with the feature during the development of Donkey Kong 64 in October 1999. Issues were cited such as potentially damaging the game cartridges during the swapping process, and variations of the Nintendo 64 hardware which may have made the feature unreliable in regards to sending the data. It is said that later models of the Nintendo 64 would struggle to retain any memory once switched off due to revised hardware. And yes, those Sandcastle codes we discussed in an earlier chapter were confirmed to simply be contingency plans. It was suggested by Nintendo to use passcodes or Sandcastle codes to access Banjo Kazooie's secret areas and items, and then in the new game, for example Donkey Kong, have the player answer a quiz pertaining to the secret area that they had just discovered in Banjo Kazooie. A nice suggestion, but it wouldn't really have worked to create any sense of wonder or magic like Rare envisioned. So Stop and Swap was stopped and dropped. Due to Stop and Swap being dropped in 1999, no rewards were really envisioned or implemented for Banjo Tooie. However, Stop and Swap was cancelled at the 11th hour concerning Donkey Kong 64's production. Stop and Swap was fully implemented in Donkey Kong 64 and ready to go. Rare had to quickly nix and remove stop and swap related areas and features in Donkey Kong 64, hence why some hints of its existence in Donkey Kong 64 still remain. In the stage Creepy Castle, towards the end of the game, exists a museum. Within the museum, the 8th known stop and swap item once existed up until the game was close to being placed into production for public release. In the museum, in a room shielded by a pane of glass, an unusually unique stone pillar stands alone in the dark, with a simple lamp hanging overhead, almost as if to shine a light of importance onto something. But the pillar is empty. It was strange even as a kid. You could enter the room via Tiny's monkey paw pad, which teleported the player inside the strangely empty room, and you could collect some bananas for Tiny, which is a common collectible throughout the game. Seems unlikely the room would have existed just for that. Maybe you could come back later and something would happen pertaining to this pillar, but nothing ever did happen. So what evidence leads to the conclusion that this is a stop and swap related room? Many years ago, a couple of fans did question Rare via their Uncle Tusk segment on their website. Basically, it was confirmed the pillar once had a purpose, but due to fluctuations in developing, it lost its purpose. So, remember how the German Donkey Kong guide still had an old map design printed in it? Well, this applied to the Creepy Castle Museum too. On top of the now empty pillar rests a big golden statue of Donkey Kong. Of course, in the English Donkey Kong 64 player guides, the image of the statue was removed, much like the final game. Paul Makachek also practically confirmed that this was the 8th stop and swap item himself on the Retro Hour podcast, where he spoke on elements of the game that had to be modified after Nintendo pulled the plug on stop and swap. Much like the Ice Key situation, all they could do was disable and remove the minimum amount of stuff related to stop and swap. Could this long-lost statue have been destined to be the new Ice Key? We could see it from afar through the pane of glass but not touch it, not until the next game. Maybe then, like the Ice Key, this Donkey Kong statue would be swapped to another Rare title. It makes sense that the Ice Key sent to Donkey Kong would have given players a reward to using Donkey Kong, but then players would be taunted with a new secret by the way of the mystery Donkey Kong statue. Before I say anything, do you notice anything about this clip? Anything unusual or odd, I mean. While it may simply be a misspoken word or slip of the tongue, note Paul says a few places we know the team's memory is somewhat hazy on this stop and swap topic, being so long ago, but there is actually another odd location in Donkey Kong 64 which I wish to bring up briefly. Upon entering the Mermaid's Palace of Gloomy Galleon, a cutscene cinematically focuses on an empty glass porthole in the background on the left-hand side of the room, before panning to show the mermaid princess sobbing. Now, the game almost wants you to notice the empty glass porthole, and going forward, this is all speculation, of course. This is all speculation. But what is the point of this one glass covered alcove? You can actually explore the 3D model of the room and see the backside of the alcove, and it protrudes quite far back, surprisingly. You must admit, this room is quite fitting for a legendary stop and swap item, wouldn't you say? A place of royalty, a mythical creature, a mermaid. Could the alcove simply have housed a golden banana, basically a common collectible which would emerge from the glass after getting the mermaid pearls back? Honestly, don't believe so. Most banana prizes in the game tend to just emerge from thin air once you have completed a task. The opening cutscene just places a strange emphasis on the glass-covered alcove on the left-hand side. And the room is asymmetrical. There isn't any other portholes in the room. I did ask, look at the window, about this situation, and he stated the following. Personally, I do have a bit of trouble trying to believe this is simply for aesthetic reasons. It's not particularly very attractive. Humans prefer symmetry. If there was one on either side of the throne, I could understand it, but just one on the left hand side looking into a brick wall. There's nothing aesthetic about that. It doesn't fit the royal regal theme. The room has a red carpet. It's designed to look attractive. Or if it was some kind of aquarium and there were fish swimming around in there, I could understand it. But what do you guys think? What do you think this empty porthole could be? Do you think it was just for aesthetic reasons, or do you think there could have been more to it? So maybe the glass was never intended to open, but that doesn't mean a special item, if it was to be transferred over, for example from Banjo Tooie, from Atlantis, then this aquatic special item couldn't have simply spawned into its rightful place behind the glass. Again, this is all speculation, of course, as we have no evidence. Unfortunately, the mermaid room is not shown in detail in the German guide that alluded to the ice key door and revealed the Golden Kong statue. While initially believed Stop and Swap would only involve Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie, with Donkey Kong 64 later revealed to be part of the lineup, it was later confirmed that Stop and Swap was to encompass many Rare titles. In the 3 months following Banjo Kazooie's release on June the 29th, 1998, these are the following games that would have been in development at Rare: Banjo Tooie, Donkey Kong 64, Jet Force Gemini, Conker 12 Tales, Dinosaur Planet, and Perfect Dark. Originally, there were 7 mystery eggs in Banjo Kazooie, but one became the ice key specifically for Donkey Kong 64. Paul also confirmed on the Retro Hour podcast recently that if they had time and more planning, perhaps one of the mystery eggs would have been made to resemble a gun to be sent to Perfect Dark 64. Since the team weren't sure what games the mystery items would be sent to, they opted to create the mystery items to just resemble mystery Easter eggs. So while certain games were hoped to connect to the Stop and Swap connection, let's take a look at the actual fate of each game that Rare hoped that Stop and Swap could potentially have connected to, which was the next 6 upcoming games. We already know what happened with Donkey Kong 64. Stop and Swap was included and ready to go, but then Nintendo nixed it at the 11th hour. As for Banjo Tooie, we know that Stop and Swap was removed in the end, but it's very probable in the early days of production, ideas regarding Stop and Swap were being incorporated, hence Captain Blackeye and his Tavern of Mysteries. Jet Force Gemini released just before Donkey Kong 64, and Donkey Kong 64 was the second known game to include the Stop and Swap feature. Therefore, it seems very likely that the Jet Force Gemini team at Rare were not included in on the plan of Stop and Swap, or had not been reached out to before finishing the game, and so Stop and Swap was never a part of Jet Force Gemini. The Jet Force Gemini team did eventually go on to make Mickey's Speedway USA, so it's very possible that Stop and Swap could even have been integrated into that game, had the Stop and Swap idea gone ahead, of course. Next up is Conker 12 Tales, which was actually gutted and started again from the ground up. and it became Conker's Bad Fur Day. As a result of this, there's absolutely no connection to Stop and Swap in Bad Fur Day, but it's possible in an early version of 12 Tales there could have been some kind of vague connectivity or plans at least. Next up is Dinosaur Planet, one of the last few games that Rare worked on the Nintendo 64. Of course, this game eventually evolved into Star Fox Adventures on the Nintendo GameCube. A ROM of Dinosaur Planet did leak, and from what I understand, there's absolutely no references or any kind of indication of any stop and swap connectivity. That goes without saying as well that Star Fox Adventures also has none either, being on a completely different console. Which begs the question, even if Stop and Swap did go to plan, it was actually getting close to the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle, so some of these games would never really have been able to stop and swap with Banjo Kazooie. The whole stop and swap process could have been cut short, but not quite as short as it actually was. So the final game to touch on is Perfect Dark 64, and I want to touch on this a little bit more than the others, mainly from comments that I've seen online regarding stop and swap, etc., which I wish to address. Perfect Dark 64 is packed with its own mysteries, the Punk Pon, the Chicago Ghost, and the now solved Cheese Mystery. Two Perfect Dark oddities I want to quickly touch on involve a keyhole and a question mark, so you can see where I'm going with this. In the multiplayer map Warehouse, on the top floor in some ventilation shafts, a grill with a question mark on it can be seen in the roof, with an ammo pack above it that is unobtainable. There are also ammo crates in another multiplayer stage, sewers that can't be obtained. Now, the ones in the sewer are clearly props to make the sewers look like they're littered with junk. However, the question mark grill ammo pack, to my understanding, is tagged to fall in the game's memory if the grill was to be opened up. I can't confirm that, that's just what I've heard. If you know anything about that, please comment below. Also, on an old Rare website, on the Uncle Tusk section, when quizzed about the question mark grill, it was stated that it was put there just for fun. Due to other technicalities of the level, such as it only having 5 gun spawns when all the others have 6, I do believe there was probably more to this at some point. It could have been a Perfect Dark exclusive secret where there was a secret gun up there or something you could discover. Additionally, in Area 51 there is a small ventilation shaft that exists with a strange keyhole in it. Normally this cannot be viewed or reached by the player, and it is easy to assume a connection to Stop and Swap due to the symbols, a question mark, a keyhole. I did however ask Paul if any work towards Banjo Kazooie and Perfect Dark connecting had been done, and he, to his recollection, said he doesn't believe any discussion took place with the Perfect Dark team regarding Stop and Swap. So the question mark and the keyhole, just a coincidence? We'll put this down to no Stop and Swap links. Now I will present a hypothetical demonstration of what Stop and Swap on the Nintendo 64 could have been like if it had panned out. For the sake of keeping things simple, I will pretend Jet Force Gemini, Conker's Bad Fur Day and Dinosaur Planet were part of the Stop and Swap equation. First you would play Banjo Kazooie, and obviously once completed you'd move on to another game such as Donkey Kong 64. You would activate the Ice Key Chamber back in Banjo Kazooie as I discussed back in Chapter 9. You would get the Ice Key from Banjo Kazooie and send it back to Donkey Kong 64. You would use the ice key in Donkey Kong 64 and open up the ice door to get yourself a reward to use in the game. Now we know that there's an ice chest in Banjo Tooie, so we send the ice key from Donkey Kong 64 to Banjo Tooie, where we can open the ice chest and unlock Dragon Kazooie. Then you would be playing Jet Force Gemini and you'd come across a frozen ice cave on the planet Cerulean. Well, the ice key's in Banjo Tooie, so we better send it over to Jet Force Gemini to unlock a secret reward there too. And so the ice key will pass around from game to game, unlocking various secret areas. And maybe the ice key's final resting place would have been somewhere in Area 51, where the cryogenic chambers are, in Perfect Dark 64. Back in Banjo Tooie, talking to a drunken Captain Blackeye, he lets slip that he knows that Shark Food Island in Treasure Trove Cove holds the pink egg. He opened the cave earlier, but he was too sick to scale inside to get the egg. So, you now return to Banjo Kazooie to get the pink egg for yourself, and then you send it to Tooie and unlock a reward in Banjo Tooie. Meanwhile, in Conker's Bad Fur Day, you discover that one of Conker's cousins leaves his yellow treasure out on his table while he's asleep during the winter. So, you go over to Banjo Kazooie to get the yellow egg on Nabnut's table. You then send it straight back across to Conker's Bad Fur Day. You then learn that in Mizar's Palace in Jet Force Gemini, an event occurs that triggers access to this golden statue room in Donkey Kong 64 Creepy Castle. But it turns out that you need to send the statue over to Dinosaur Planet. Sending the statue to Dinosaur Planet will result in an event triggering where you can go back to Banjo Tooie, where you will find a golden mermaid statue. This statue is then sent to Donkey Kong 64 and placed into the mermaid's porthole. Meanwhile, in Perfect Dark 64, an event is triggered which tells us that we need to go to the distant past to get a treasure to bring it back to the future. So we return to Gobi's Valley, going to the ancient tomb and get the blue egg, and send it back to Perfect Dark, where it can be hatched for a new weapon, for example. Ultimately, like Paul Makachek envisioned and suggested, the games would send codes and items back and forth between each other in all directions, ultimately becoming more elaborate as it went on. Hey, maybe we would have unlocked a secret level in one of the games after all. Of course, that was just a crude speculative representation of what Stop and Swap could have been, had the dreams shared by the Banjo team have come to fruition. What could the final reward have been? What could have been? While efficiently Rare's vision of Stop and Swap is lost to time, it seems that maybe through fan dedication, Stop and Swap on the N64 could live on. You thought that jumping around in time was over? Well, in 2008, 8 years after Banjo Tooie, Rare released Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Players that pre-ordered also got access to a fully realised version of the original Banjo Kazooie game, with improved graphics, a leaderboard and achievements. The restored functionality of Stop and Swap was promised, but the ice key and the mystery eggs would be transferred to Nuts and Bolts. I wasn't nuts about this. To cut a long story short, the items, when sent from Banjo Kazooie to Nuts and Bolts, ultimately unlocked special vehicle parts. Additionally, with the release of Log's Special Challenges, a DLC for Nuts and Bolts, the secrets unlocked special vehicle blueprints. 2 weeks after the DLC, Banjo Tooie Xbox Live Arcade was released. Now, finally, Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie on the Xbox could connect and Stop and Swap in the modern era. Cold swapping carts was not part of the process now. Simply turning on Banjo Tooie Xbox Live Arcade with the stop and swap items collected in Banjo Kazooie Xbox Live Arcade. Framed portraits serving as file selects would be decorated with the stop and swap logo, meaning the feature was ready to be used. Now the player will begin with all the secret items from Banjo Kazooie. The ice key is still taken to the giant ice chest to ultimately unlock Dragon Kazooie. Eggy will once again hatch the eggs, the pink, the blue and the green eggs, all unlocking the Briggle Bash, the Omen eggs and the multiplayer Ginger. The hatching of the yellow egg and the red egg provides the player with a contemporary gamer profile picture and a dashboard theme Banjo Tooie for the Xbox. And the grand prize for the Cyan Egg is... You read it correctly, the Cyan Egg unlocks a new menu in Banjo Tooie Xbox Live Arcade Edition, Stop and Swap 2. This likely will be a short chapter, but again I need to touch upon this and I will provide my thoughts on the Xbox version of Stop and Swap 2. Anyway, the hatching of the Cyan Egg results in a pseudo notification popping up, like if you were to unlock an achievement or a trophy on PlayStation Network. This would add a text reward of "Oh no, not again" onto the Stop and Swap 2 menu. Performing certain in-game actions resulted in additional text rewards appearing onto the Stop and Swap 2 menu. For example, using all of Humba Wumba's transformations would unlock the Karma Chameleon reward. Think of these bubbles of text on the menu to simply be like the 6 mystery eggs and the ice key from the original game, but in a list form. Other tasks included beating the boss replay mode within 15 minutes, and so forth. However, to get the final 3 rewards onto the Stop and Swap 2 menu, the player needed to simply locate the locations where the pesky Banjo Kazooie game packs existed in the N64 version of Banjo Tooie. In each of the areas, a new special egg could be found within the game packs. The bronze egg, the silver egg, and the gold egg. Heggy cannot hatch these eggs, and so far no rare game has connected to Banjo Tooie Xbox Live Arcade in order to transfer and utilise these awards secrets. Who knows if anything will happen regarding these. I kind of feel like this is just a bit of a joke or a parody on the old Stop and Swap situation and wasn't really intended to be used, but if there ever is a Banjo Kazooie game, they may incorporate these rewards. However, I must admit I have no real interest if anything happens with the Stop and Swap 2 menu. The reward list doesn't quite have the same excitement as the mystery eggs and the ice key in the original Banjo Kazooie, and unlocking these rewards in Stop and Swap 2 list isn't really fun either. What made the OG Stop and Swap items so exciting and mysterious was the secret locations they were discovered in, that fanfare, and that Stop and Swap musical score that lingered with you in the rooms after you'd plundered the secret items. It was a grand mystery. This place is easily one of my favourite areas in Banjo Kazooie. The cacophony of the fanfare, and then the peace that settles, and the wavering high-pitched instrumentation, the setting of the tomb. Not knowing where this secret was intended to go, wondering what could we have done to open this ancient door to allow us access to this tomb. In retrospect, we now know that we likely would have gained access from playing another rare title, possibly Perfect Dark. What could we have done in Perfect Dark that could have triggered this ancient tomb to open? The whole thing is just so much more exciting and magical and personal feeling, as opposed to Stop and Swap 2, where You simply have to die 40 times in a boss rush mode to unlock some kind of reward. Yeah, I rest my case. So now, I would like to quickly go over the different versions of Stop and Swap that have existed over the years between the N64 and the Xbox. First of all, we have the OG Stop and Swap of the Nintendo 64 era, the intended link of Banjo Kazooie to Donkey Kong 64, Banjo Tooie and other Nintendo 64 rare titles by using the cold swapping method. Due to the OG Stop and Swap being cancelled, Banjo Tooie 64 was then released with the compensatory eggs and ice key. Basically, items that were programmed into the game that the player could collect and use without any swapping of carts needed. Then we jump to the Xbox. Here we have Xbox's Banjo Kazooie Homage Stop and Swap, which links Xbox Live Arcade Banjo Kazooie to Nuts and Bolts and to the Xbox Live Arcade version of Banjo Tooie. And hatching the sign egg in Banjo Tooie Xbox Live Arcade will result in the Stop and Swap 2 menu, which is currently unusable and possibly just a parody with no real intention of any use. Personally, the Xbox generation of the Stop and Swap homage did nothing to excite me. Though it was a nice gesture, the rewards of the Game Epic and Xbox theme were apparently rewards that were never going to be a part of the OG Stop and Swap's reward system. As for the vehicle parts unlocked in Nuts and Bolts, I'm sure some may have enjoyed them. Unfortunately, these rewards did not satiate me, aware that there were likely grander things in mind for the mystery items in the N64 OG Stop and Swap. We now know that the ice key would have gone to Donkey Kong 64 and opened up secrets. We know Donkey Kong would have secrets to send to other games as well. We know Banjo Kazooie was potentially going to link and web with 6 other games, and that the prizes may have been more elaborate as time went on, according to Paul Makachet in his interview with Retro Hour. I wanted to cover Xbox's homage Stop and Swap to make a point that though it was a nice gesture, it was a shadow of what Stop and Swap could have been. I've seen people online say, hey, Stop and Swap solved, we know what items you get, you can do it on the Xbox. But the point I really wanted to make is that actually the Xbox prizes were certainly not prizes that we would have acquired on the N64, as exemplified by the Game Epic and the dashboard theme. Talking of those planned prizes on the N64, we'll actually touch on that in the next chapter. Also, the magic of Stop and Swap is kind of lost with the modern age of data easily being transferred between devices. Having said that, I still think that a fleshed out Stop and Swap kind of scenario in a game in the modern age could still work and still be very exciting. Although with how easy it is to data mine games nowadays, it would probably have to be a part of some kind of online game where there are servers and there's only information that the developer can access on those servers, so people can't just hack into all the secrets beforehand. Right, we're nearing the end, on to the last major chapter. On the 20th of July 2023, YouTuber Scowo uploaded a video doing something quite astonishing. He uploaded a video of himself performing Stop and Swap on the N64 console itself, something no one thought they would ever see. In fact, Paul Makachet commented how this was the first time that the feature in Banjo Kazooie had been seen working outside of Twycross. Paul also highlights that the method should have been done with cold swapping and not hot swapping. In the video, to my understanding, Scarwo uses a modified The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time ROM to deposit a payload of data into the memory of the Nintendo 64, which Banjo Kazooie has been programmed to search for in order to unlock Shark Food Island. Scarwo quickly switches carts and returns back to Banjo Kazooie. He returns to Treasure Trove Cove and Shark Food Island is now raised, showing how stop and swap could have been performed had Rare not been stopped by Nintendo for cautionary reasons. To clarify, Zelda was never a part of the stop and swap process. Scarwo simply used it as a placeholder in this situation. In reality, an event in Banjo Tooie, perhaps talking to Blackeye as mentioned before, would have triggered the payload to be deposited into the N64's memory, and then you would have returned to Banjo Kazooie and found Shark Food Island raised up out of the ocean. I will keep Scarwo's video details to a minimum, so you can always pop over and enjoy his video. I will also now bring together some of the comments left on Scarwo's video, which Paul has responded to himself, and we'll have a look at those. I'll just pop this one on the screen here and you can pause the video and read through Paul's post if you wish. So here is somebody accusing the Banjo team of spelling swap wrong again and convincing even Paul that they've spelt it wrong. But anyway, I actually asked a question regarding why Shark Food Island was showing up around Captain Blackeye on the pictures, if they were trolling us. Paul replied that they weren't trolling, it was just pre-internet jokes. I think that kind of equates to the same thing personally, but I don't think this disregards the aspect that Blackeye likely was involved with the stop and swap. As they mentioned a long time ago in the Tepid Sea, Blackeye was supposed to play a bigger role in the tavern, and he had a mission of his own. Nothing came of it, and he has all those pictures of the pink egg around him. So I think they probably just left them there after the stop and swap was canned, just for a joke. But I don't believe that the pictures were there just for a joke. As for what rewards Stop and Swap could have given us in Banjo Tooie and beyond, we'll never know, because the team themselves didn't know either. So in regards to what would we have unlocked beyond Donkey Kong's Stop and Swap, we will never know, because Rare themselves do not know. And in fact, learning this, that even Rare didn't know what the rewards would be, put my mind at peace, because for a long time I was really curious what these long lost rewards were going to be. Turns out they never actually really even existed yet, not even as a figment of their imagination. Here is our good friend Paul trying to convince us that there's nothing to talk about regarding Stop and Swap anymore. Now, I will give you, in relation to Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie, that's probably true. However, when it comes to Donkey Kong 64, myself and a few others would still like to know what was behind that ice door that was removed from Donkey Kong 64. What was the Banjo Kazooie freezer for? And what about that Donkey Kong golden statue in Creepy Castle? Was that going to remain in there until another game came out, like the Ice Key in Banjo Kazooie? Or would we be able to collect that in relation to the Ice Key swapping over? They're the only things that we could still learn in regards to the original Stop and Swap, because they were implemented. And if anyone who worked on Donkey Kong can remember in regards to those three things there, I would like to know. They are the only things about Stop and Swap on the N64 that we could still really learn about. And it's in your mind somewhere. If you can remember, you can put us all out of our misery. As crazy as it sounds, I think about that parallel universe where Stop and Swap was successful, and we have all these Rare games connecting to each other, and how fun it would have been. And it would have felt like magic, but at the same time, Paul and any other member of Rare who could potentially hear this, I still think you've created a lot of good magic. Just because Stop and Swap didn't get off the ground
don't think that you didn't still create magic. And like you said in one of your interviews, the homage to Stop and Swap on the Xbox, it was nice, but it wasn't the intended method, and it didn't quite have that magic because it wasn't the same as using the carts to swap back and forth. And it does annoy me when I see people saying, why didn't you use the memory pack? Why didn't you use the expansion pack? They use that term interchangeably. And I'm sat there thinking, and you say it too, Paul, because it wouldn't have been the same. You wanted to do something innovative. You wanted to create magic, and swapping the carts was an unusual and magic process. To a child, it would have seemed like magic. By the way, I am freestyling this section for the first time in this entire video. This is just freestyled in response to these comments. So I actually asked Paul here, why were some of the Stop and Swap eggs just simply kind of dumped in regular locations that we could access and not in special secret areas? Seems to be that his response was simply that because it was added towards the end of Banjo Kazooie's development, some of the items were just simply rushed into a kind of a location to be collected, and if they'd had more time they probably would have given them secretive areas too, so perhaps we wouldn't have had an egg just dumped on top of Logo the toilet, and it would have been a bit more prestige and a bit more exciting if they'd had a bit more time. I don't really have anything to say about this, but if you wish to read it, then you can pause the video here and read it. Now, I'd like to quickly look forward to what Scour's video could mean going forward. Here, RareGamer from the Rare Witch project discusses and puts forward an idea about reinstating Stop and Swap into Donkey Kong 64. Copy the scanning software code in Banjo Kazooie to start on boot of Donkey Kong 64. The code used to be in Donkey Kong 64 and it's fully understood in Banjo Kazooie by the modding scene. This allows Donkey Kong 64 to read the memory when a successful transfer has been made from Banjo Kazooie. We know that this would have been done to hand over the ice key from Banjo Kazooie to Donkey Kong 64. Copy the writing to memory code in Banjo Kazooie for the ice key. This would be much easier to implement as Donkey Kong 64 already writes memory. You would simply need the address that corresponds with Banjo Kazooie's ice key, as Scour has done with the pink egg, and the connection to Banjo Kazooie will be complete. Banjo will have everything it needs to grant access to the ice key in a manner that is legitimate, as it was the intended means of transfer plotted all the way back in 1998. Restore the ice key to the Donkey Kong 64 menu. The address pointing to the leftover text has been found, and its reactivation causes the ice key to already appear in the Totals menu in Donkey Kong 64. All one would need to do here is modify the address so that it appears when the scanning software detects the ice key coming from Banjo Kazooie. For cosmetic purposes, you would also need to create a render of the spinning ice key to appear in the said menu, which was removed by Rare when they were told to remove Stop and Swap, with only the ice key text remaining. Place a laver in front of Chunky's Gorilla Gone pad in Crystal Caves and the cutscene. If the Stop and Swap patent is to be interpreted literally, then Donkey Kong 64 would use a lever to start the process. Due to many levers in the game corresponding with cutscenes following interactions, one would simply need to copy that code, pointing the address to the cutscene in Donkey Kong's treehouse, which has been preserved in the game. Complicating matters would be the need to recreate a portion of Wozz's cave to be realised in Donkey Kong 64 as a cutscene. When the lever is pulled, players watch a cutscene showing the now open area in Wozz's cave via Donkey Kong 64. Importing this model and creating a camera angle to be assumed when the lever is pulled would make this easier. 5. Restore the Banjo Kazooie fridge in Donkey Kong's treehouse. This would be a simple cosmetic addition to Donkey Kong's treehouse. 2 models could be created, 1 fridge that is shut, which will occupy the treehouse for a majority of the game, and 1 that is open following the cutscene in the treehouse to allow Donkey Kong to step through it. 6. Restore the big icy door in Crystal Caves. We know that the big icy door would have been featured on the left side of Chunky's Gorilla Gun pad, against the wall. The guides have outlined this position, and it's the reason that approaching the wall will have the camera swing around to face it straight on despite showing nothing of interest. If a door was recreated that could open when approached with the ice key, then we would have restored the function that it serves, barring a hidden object from view and collection until the ice key was obtained by Donkey Kong 64. And, optionally, we could try to get the golden Donkey Kong statue restored to Creepy Castle. Outside of the ice key swap, Donkey Kong 64 would have required another game to obtain the Donkey Kong statue in Creepy Castle. It's very likely every game to use stop and swap following Banjo Kazooie would have had a door or item that relied on Banjo Kazooie to unlock, with a secondary item that would become the game's new mystery. If Rare's plan had come to fruition in 1999, you could have transferred the ice key from Banjo Kazooie, solving that mystery. But the message boards would have been alive with topics like how do I get that trophy in Creepy Castle? It would make sense that players would need to wait for an upcoming Rare release like Dinosaur Planet, Perfect Dark or Banjo Tooie to unlock this new mystery. Donkey Kong 64 would simply need to scan the memory after the future game had begun its process to unlock. For our purposes, we could place the golden statue above the pillar, simply removing the monkey paw in the pillar room and behind the frantic factory link, so that the room couldn't be entered early. Once Donkey Kong 64 has scanned a positive transfer from a future Rare title, it would enable the monkey paws, allowing players to collect the mystery object, perhaps even transferring it to another game entirely. So here we are at the very end. We started in 1998 and have ended in 2024. We have learned so much related to the stop and swap mystery, yet there is still a huge void in regards to stop and swap on the N64. I have a natural interest in mysteries, be that real world mysteries or video game mysteries. Learning so much about stop and swap, especially that some aspects are simply unsolvable, has given me some peace of mind. It is paradoxical. I find peace being aware that I will never know, and yet I do know. Stop and swap was never complete. It was over almost as soon as it began. Minus the loose ends of Donkey Kong 64's gutted stop and swap features, which are the only aspects of the N64 stop and swap we could in theory still learn about, if a Donkey Kong 64 developer can remember, then we'd know everything. And anything we don't know, it is also what the developers of Stop and Swap don't know. Beyond Donkey Kong 64, no solid plans or rewards were ever decided upon. Now, I don't sit around all day obsessing about Stop and Swap.
But we can hope talented ROM hackers and game modders at some point in the future create a fan fiction stop and swap across N64 games. So there is a hopeful lining to it all, even if it would be a fan-made creation. Then it brings us back to that knot. What would it be like had Rare done this? So as I stand here in the sunshine, peacefully on this crate beside Shark Food Island, as it rests beneath the waves, I do ponder about that idea Paul Makachek mentioned of the parallel universe, where Stop and Swap went ahead and created magic to all those kids of the mid to the late 90s. I will ponder what would have raised Shark Food Island from the ocean to allow the pink mystery egg to escape from its watery grave. What fun or exciting rewards could have unlocked? Again, no rewards were planned, but what could have been? I'll occasionally feel bad for that Nintendo 64 ice key in its chamber, forever waiting for its time to be sent over to Donkey Kong 64 to unlock that ice door. The child in me will still get a chill of excitement and anticipation down my spine as I think of that sacred ancient tomb in Gobi's Valley encasing that mystery blue egg. The tomb and its secret forever waiting to give up its prize legitimately on the N64. Rare's Stop and Swap on the N64 is gone, but in time, with dedication, a fan replacement could be made. So that is all I have to say on gaming's greatest failed mystery. Thank you for watching.